And Mike, if you're ready, I'll switch screens and make you presenter.
All right, let's get the show on the road.
All right, everyone, have a great webinar.
All right, can you see my screen okay there, Rachel?
Yes.
Great, awesome. All right, thanks, Rachel, for the awesome introduction. So thanks, everybody, for attending today. And today we're going to be talking about interviews, talking about the technology interview in particular, and talking about how to master that, some tips and tricks about that. So first, to kind of tell you about myself and my credentials and why I can talk about this, why I feel like I'm qualified to. I'm a Microsoft SQL Server certified in business intelligence. I'm a BI architect and a managing project lead here at PragmaticWorks. I'm authored on several books in SQL Server also, and I've done over 100 interviews for PragmaticWorks over the last 5 years. And so I've done a lot of interviews. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in interviews, and I'll share some of that with you throughout this webinar today. So our agenda today, we're just going to talk about a little intro here and talk about the differences between a regular interview and a technology interview. I say regular interview, but I don't think there's really any regular interview, but just a technology interview versus, say other interviews. Talk about some tips, top 10 tips for regular interviews and top 10 tips for technology interviews. Some do's and don'ts, some things that you should never do in an interview and some things you should always do. I'll give you some good news today also, and then at the end we'll have a little fun. I'll tell you about some horror stories of some of the interviews I've had. Hopefully none of those people were actually here watching the webinar today, but if they are good, maybe they'll learn from it. One horror story, you should never go to the interview dressed like this. This is just not a good idea, showing up dressed like this. I'm just kidding. Nobody actually showed up dressed like that at the interview. That was me at prom. Just kidding. No, it wasn't. No. All right. So technology interviews. So we're going to talk about a little bit the difference between a technology interview and say a normal interview, if there is a normal interview. In a non-technology interview, you're talking more about your past experiences, projects you've worked on, kind of your work history, and you don't really go in depth on deep questions on things you know. Where in a technology interview, it's the exact opposite. Now it's great you worked on that project, but tell me, what actual parts of the project did you work on? Tell me about the actual steps you took to build it. Can you answer questions that are very specific about your project that you built? Can you tell me about how you set up? And we're going to talk about SQL Server today because SQL Server is just my passion, so I'm going to use that as an example a lot today. But I built this data warehouse. That's great. How did you set up security on that? Tell me about the security you set up. Tell me how you set up. How many users did you have? There's very deep questions, and they go into the technology, and they're looking for somebody who has in-depth knowledge of those subjects and knows about that technology. So it's quite different than a normal interview because you have those tech questions, and answering those types of questions can be difficult for people. You may know the technology. You may know it, you may work with it every day, but answering a question about it and actually talking about it is something separate, and that's something that you should practice and something you should know how to do when you walk into an interview. You want to be upfront. When you walk into a technology interview, if someone's sitting down talking to you about SQL Server, there's a lot of parts to SQL Server, a lot. And to walk in and say, yes, I know SQL Server, that's a broad topic there. But if you walk in and say, you know what, I've been working with reporting services for years now. I've built hundreds of reports. I've used these types of tools inside reporting services. I'm very passionate about that. I love working with it, and I have a good wealth of knowledge of that. I've worked with SSIS a little bit, but not as much, and I'm not as familiar with it as I am with, say, reporting services. Just be upfront. Talk about what you do know, what you don't know. But the most important part is to be enthusiastic. To show that you're enthusiastic about the technology, that you're about learning and growing and knowing technology. If I interview someone and they're sitting in front of me and they say, I know reporting services really well, I know it really well in the back of my hand, and then I start digging into it and asking questions specific about reporting services, and they can't answer those questions, it doesn't bode well for them. It shows they're not really, either they don't have a good evaluation of themselves, or they're trying to put on a facade that's not them. If you're up front, you talk about what you do know, what you don't know, and then you show enthusiasm. Oh yeah, I'd love to learn that. That's something I really want to dig into. I haven't done yet. I've got a book on that, or I've got I've got this webinar I'm watching on it, or just talk about how you're learning and how you're growing. That passion and that enthusiasm shows much better than someone who tries to walk into an interview and show that they know something that they don't know. So you should be willing to learn at any point in time. No matter what age you are, no matter where you're at, you should always be willing to put time in to learn and grow throughout your entire career. Technology changes faster than anything else out there in terms of the job market. Microsoft's always coming out with some new feature and some new product. And knowing that product or knowing that new feature, not that you're a master at it, but just knowing about it, keeping up on it, reading blogs, following Microsoft's blogs on SQL Server, reading blogs from some of the MVPs that are out there, maybe some of the guys here work at Pragmatic Works, just tracking that information and knowing it and being up to date on that shows that you're passionate about learning. You're passionate about staying up to date on technology. If you stop learning and growing in the technology field, within 4 years you become obsolete. You've totally stopped learning, you've totally stopped growing. The technology has changed to the point where you're going to make yourself obsolete in the job market. You have to constantly learn and grow in the technology field. And that's why technology interviews are quite different than most interviews, because of that learning and growing. People are looking for people who are passionate about learning and growing and continuing to develop. If I hire someone who knows SQL Server really well, up, down, left, and right, but then they say, yeah, I really don't want to learn anything new. And within 3 or 4 years, this guy's obsolete to me, and I really can't use him much more in the field.